What's up, everyone? What's going on? Welcome into the in-season edition of the Max Brown Show. We're giving you reactions to the college football week that was just had. Just got back from Virginia versus Coastal Carolina. Absolute blowout. It's funny, you get excited for college football coming back, and then you realize all the blowouts in the early weeks. But we're fired up to be back. I did something new this year. So last year I had a bunch of 1 p.m. kickoffs, which then on Saturday, local time, Eastern time zone, which then allowed me to get back West Coast time and sleep in my own bed, which is amazing. It's not going to be the case as much this year. I'll be getting 3:30 p.m. and 6 p.m. kicks. Had a 6 p.m. kick yesterday. But my point is, I got up super early this morning, 5:30, no, like 4 o'clock, for a 5:30 flight from Charlottesville to Atlanta, and then Atlanta back to L.A. I slept the whole Atlanta flight getting there, Atlanta to LA, but then I don't take the nap. You don't take the Monday morning nap, so then I power through. It allows me to watch all 22 film for this show, so I'm giving you guys informed takes. You can't give a fully fleshed out take without watching the all 22. So we're diving in. Cam Cox, what's going on, man? All right, got the thumbs up. That audio on both is looking good. But I'm fired up about this. A lot happened yesterday. There's the Arch Manning, Ohio State stuff. There's Florida State, which to me was the team of the day. Kalen DeBoer, which I was a Kalen DeBoer believer. I called his first game at Washington, so I've been there from the jump in some way. But we'll talk about that. Interested about where Ohio State's at. That's a big thing. And then LSU. Those of you guys that watch these lives consistently, which I know the deal, there's probably only probably right now like 50 on TikTok, maybe 15, a few more. Hopefully we can get up to like 30 these first couple weeks on YouTube. LSU was my SEC pick. The reason why was Garrett Nussmeier, but we learned that they can beat you in different ways. Fired up about that. And then what we learned from week one, I'll get into that as well. And a little Gus Malzahn chatter for Florida State. But first topic, Arch Manning. If you're selling Arch Manning stock, I'm buying. I am buying. We are overreacting to one game. And I get people push back on like, yo, what were we doing? He only had 2 starts. Why were we calling him a Heisman favorite? There's a difference between being a bad player and having a bad game. That was a bad game for Arch Manning. And the reason that I know it was a bad game is because look at how Steve Sarkisian was calling plays. There was the utmost confidence that his quarterback could operate the offense and operate the passing game. How many college football games have we seen this whole weekend where you get the sense that the offensive coordinator is trying to protect his starting quarterback? Let me write a little note down real quick. That happens all the time. That was not the case with Sark. And I would even argue that this offense felt more quarterback-led than when Quinn Ewers was behind center, which is funny because, Quinn's now in the NFL and whatnot. But so you can tell Sark trusts this dude. And if you're selling Arch stock, I'm buying. Is he going to win the Heisman tomorrow? No. Does he need to get better? Yes. Some stats for you guys. He finished with an off-target percentage of 37%. So 37% of his pass attempts off-target. It's the worst by a Texas quarterback in a single game over the last 10 seasons. They've had some good quarterbacks over the past 10 years. You start getting into 15 years, that's where it's tough. But I feel like he settled in the fourth quarter. And the reason that I'm still high on Arch is, for a couple of reasons. But one, he had the best throw in college football that I've seen this week. That sideline throw right in front of Sark late in the fourth quarter, hole shot on a little wheel route, safety coming to clean that kid's clock. After a first 3 quarters where you hadn't been playing well, it takes some guts to pull that trigger. I also feel like you can tell. So the big issue for me, and anyone that follows me on X, I was saying this, I'm concerned about his footwork and mechanics, which is ironic because his name's Manning, his last name is Manning, and that should not be an issue. That was very much an issue in that game. And it's funny because usually when you say, hey, a quarterback's having footwork issues, it's usually like a happy feet thing. Like they look unsettled or they consistently overstride or they consistently have a wide base, things like that. Arch is the exact opposite, where it was almost like he was so confident, in his abilities, that then his footwork got sloppy because you could tell he was like, oh, I don't need to do that. I got the arm strength to get it out there. I don't need to reset my feet. But there were multiple times on the interception, on the left hash, when he was throwing that out route to the right sideline, his feet are pointed down the center of the field, yet he's trying to throw a flood route to the outside sideline. You can't do that. I guarantee Sark is hammering it in his brain and the drill work. In fact, I would double down because I played for Sark. I know Sark. I bet he's doubling down on the Indo period, and they're literally doing footwork drills to like make it a point of emphasis. Another thing that jumps out to me, mechanics-wise, and it reminds me of a young Josh Allen in the NFL. Young Josh Allen in the NFL, in that he throws all arm, where it's like you can tell the dude's got a cannon. I'm not going to put Arch in Josh Allen's tier yet, but you can tell the dude's got a cannon. Sorry, one second. Let me make sure I'm reformatted. Sorry. My bad. You can tell the dude's got a cannon, but he's throwing all arm, and it's like all chest. And he does this thing, especially when he gets inaccurate. He like squats down and does this like, it's not sidearm, but it's like a little whip motion. And because it's a whip, I feel like he's like doing too much rather than just like smooth it out like Josh Allen does and just, deliver the football rather than this like whip flick motion. So it's funny that my biggest concern walking away from that Texas game, given that your last name is a Manning, is mechanics and footwork. I don't worry about the confidence. I don't worry about his moxie. Like, if anything, my worry about Arch going into that Ohio State game was like, oh, maybe he tries to, maybe he goes through his progressions too quickly, and that's the reason that he gets himself into trouble. Or, he doesn't get to his third progression because he's so tunnel vision, he doesn't want to make a mistake. Or maybe he gets happy feet in the pocket. There's none of that. So, better days are ahead for Arch. Believe that. Hold on to your Arch stock. Even your Arch Heisman stock, to be honest. That's just one game. Dude, you can tell there's so much belief, again, in the way that Sark calls plays for Arch. I think he's going to be fine. And so you might be asking, well, Max, if you have all these concerns about mechanics and footworks and whatnot, like, how's he going to get back on track? Fair. But he does some things with his footwork, like moving in the pocket and keeping a base, that I love. And that's perfect. And I also have been in the other side of it of, I think the psyche for a quarterback early on, if you miss some of those throws or miss some of those reads, then you start pressing, then you start kind of naturally playing outside the system, versus if he had success on some of those quick games early on, I wonder if we're still talking about this issue. And my gut says there's going to be weeks where we're not, because nobody was talking about this footwork thing all off season. But if you're not talking about it now, I don't think you're watching the film on Arch Manning. There was two throws in particular that really stick out to me. I'll try to overlay them when I edit this for YouTube back on the back end. They were both in the first half that I think totally changed the game plan for how Sark called plays and why the offense wasn't in rhythm. There was the deep post that Arch threw into double coverage. I believe it was the second quarter. He was forcing the issue. You could tell that was probably a play that they had teed up all week, and it was like, hey, when that's there, go take your shot. He misses a curl route right there underneath. That's the first intermediate pass play that he missed. And then later on, it was a bang-bang play. Again, it was like a 2nd and 8 kind of thing. And there's a green grass flashes for Arch mid-drop, and he like goes to tuck it and run, you could tell, because he's like, oh, there's no one in the middle of the field. And then Ohio State's nose guard flips to the other A-gap, and then Arch is like, oh, crap, now I can't run, and he misses a curl route to the outside. Why does that matter, Max? Because if you can't execute in the intermediate passing game, that makes your play caller very nervous to call passing concepts to push the ball down the field. And if you're not calling passing concepts to push the ball down the field, it's hard to be explosive. It's hard to get those big plays. And sometimes you need to call those pass plays down the field to open up things underneath. Those two plays in particular, It'll never get any. There's nothing sexy about it. There's two like random plays, but I'm telling you, he left 50 yards of passing on the field. It's very easy. He's going to be kicking himself when he gets into quarterback meeting rooms. Those are the type of plays that I don't think he's going to miss in the weeks to come. I'll get into some of the Ohio State stuff. Let's get into it right now. Pellegrino, gotta have it. Let me check the little chat here. Any familiar faces? Zach, what's going on, man? Prules, what's up? TG209, what's going on? Drew, good to see you again. I respect that that's still your. I respect that it's still your graphic. Arch is gonna be fine. Hold on to your Arch stock. Facts. Am I gonna be watching the Miami game? You know it. All right, next thing. What did we learn after this week? There's three things that I learned, and I'm not gonna stretch. I'm not gonna say, hey, Georgia Tech is an ACC title. They're gonna win the ACC title. We didn't learn that. That's still TBD. I like Georgia Tech. I also wasn't surprised at all by Georgia Tech. And if you've been following offseason news, you shouldn't be either. That's welcome to the Haynes King show. That's what Georgia Tech gives you. But what we did learn, Ohio State, they reloaded. They're going to be in the thick of things. LSU, they can beat you in multiple ways, which is a big deal and something they couldn't do last year. Last year, they had to outgun you. Shit, the year before with Jaden Daniels, they had to outgun you. This squad, I think they can win a defensive slugfest like this past Saturday. Garrett Nussmeier can go full like air raid, 350 yards passing per game mode. I also think the run game could get going. There was a few runs that popped, one that got called back. This LSU team, and that's what national champions can do, they can beat you in different ways. And then for Florida State, the Seminoles have entered the chat, and it's one of those things, I got to come up for a name with this, or for this, but you know those takes that you have in the back of your mind where you're like, gosh, my gut is speaking to me that like this is going to happen, but you don't have the stones to say it? Like, I hedge my bets. For those of you, might be Zach in this chat or Archie Boy, what's up, Archie Boy, that have watched my lives every week, I told you guys, take Florida State to cover. Love that line from the jump. Take Florida State to cover. But I didn't have the stones to say, take Florida State to win. But I was kind of thinking it, which is so classic, and like, I'm being that guy. But the reason why I thought Florida State could win is exactly what showed up. But let me put a pin on that because I'll get to that. But Ohio State, Ohio State, reloading. My big takeaway, quarterback-wise, does Julian Sayin, so I thought it was super interesting. One thing that stuck out to me is in the post-game presser, you're Ryan Day. You just beat the number one team in the country. And the first thought in his head when he's talking on the field is how they basically condensed down the playbook for Julian Sayin. And there was more to be had with Julian Sayin. He was basically like, did I write down his exact quote? He was basically like, so much more to this offense or something like that. Basically saying like they put him in a condensed version of the playbook. My question to that, though, is moving forward, does it look more like C.J. Stroud a few years ago as a first-year starting quarterback, where like after a couple weeks you're like, yeah, C.J. Stroud's going to be a baller. He's going to be an NFL prospect. This offense, you got no issue. Or is it going to look like Kyle McCord, where there was a sense of anxiety every quarter about the quarterback play? There just was. It was like almost like Kyle McCord was playing not to mess up. And it's noteworthy because Kyle McCord was a damn good college football quarterback. And I think Syracuse found out yesterday they're going to miss Kyle McCord. I think he was one of the most underrated quarterbacks in college football last year. His stats were up there with anyone. But when he was wearing a Buckeye uniform, it was a totally different vibe. That's what I'm going to be paying attention to the rest of September. Does Julian Sayin go more the C.J. Stroud route, or does he go more the Kyle McCord route? Because if it's the Kyle McCord route, I still think they can win a Big Ten title. But if it's the C.J. Stroud route, shoot, they might be my favorite to win the Big Ten. Right now, if I would give Ohio State and Penn State equal odds to win the Big Ten. I'm in the minority there. I'm saying Ohio State's going to win the Big Ten because I think Oregon is loaded. That roster is as deep as it as I've seen an Oregon roster. And I know we said that last year, and I feel like we say that every year that NIL becomes a thing. But the reason I say that with Ohio State is, to me, it feels like there's no pressure on the Buckeyes, which is so bizarre. And when's the last time you ever said that about a championship team looking to repeat? I feel like there's no pressure with the Buckeyes. They're playing with house money. The monkey's off Ryan Day's back. There's pressure on Penn State with all the offseason expectations. There's pressure on Penn State not only with the offseason expectations, but because they haven't won the big game yet. So the second that they face Ohio State or Michigan, can they get over the hump? There's pressure on even like Nebraska and USC. If those coaches find themselves 500, that would be an interesting conversation. There's pressure on Oregon. They've been knocking on the door for 15 years. Dan Lanning, can he take that next step? There's no pressure on Ohio State, which is so unique. I've never seen a championship roster like that. And Michigan fans might be like, yeah, Max, what you talking about? I mean, they got to beat us. I don't think that's – I mean, that's a 1 week thing. Ohio State right now, really the past 6 months, I'm sure they've been thinking about Texas, not Michigan, in my opinion. Found out a lot about Ohio State's defensive line, for sure. Last year you lose JT, Sammamish native JT, Jack Sawyer, Tyleik Williams, and Ty Hamilton. You knew they had Caleb Downs and Sonny Styles, and you knew, like, all right, their defense is going to be solid. Wasn't sure where that defensive line's out. Those dudes showed out. Curry, Jackson, Atkinson, the North Carolina transfer, they loved him last year. 10 pressures off the ends. And I feel like that was one thing of, like, if you're going to win a championship, you got to have ends that can control the game. And I know Texas's offensive line, that was a question mark for them as well. But by no means is that group a slouch. But Ohio State's defensive line, if I'm a Buckeye fan, that's one thing that I'm walking away of, like, all right, our quarterback is not going to be the weakness of our team, and our defensive line is good. All right, from there, we're chilling. Let's go try to repeat as national champions. Second thing I learned, LSU, they were my pick to win the SEC. Garrett Nussmeier was my pick to win the Heisman preseason. Odds favorite. I like some Dante, or like odds-wise, value odds-wise. I like guys like Dante Moore. But if I had to put, my life on the line, Garrett Nussmeier was going to be that guy. I mentioned how what I learned about LSU, they can beat you in different ways. That was not the case. I mentioned that, 20 minutes ago. They can beat you different ways, and that's what championship teams do. It reminds me of, like, hoops, right? If you have a guy, Damian Lillard, who can put up 35 a game, all right, that's great. That's going to win you maybe 50 regular season games. But when you get to the playoffs, you got to have different ways, different guys to go to. LSU, last year, their run game was ass. Their secondary was not good. They go in the portal. They address secondary. Run game, I know statistically it wasn't great. Did I write that down? It was like, yes. Running game-wise, it wasn't great yesterday, but first play of the game, they had another run pop in the second drive, and then they should have had another 25-yard run pop, but it got called back. But I just feel like, especially SEC schedule, going on the road, of all the teams that you saw in the SEC, a lot of them like have a strict identity. I don't think that's going to be the case for LSU. There's going to be games like you saw yesterday, Harold Perkins, that defense, they win you a game. There's going to be games where it's an absolute shootout. Garrett Nussmeier wins you games. I think there's going to be games where teams drop 8, as you saw. I mean, that was like the Caleb Williams deal, right? You drop 8 versus USC, force them to run the rock. I think LSU could win games that way. But they're secondary. That's the biggest thing. And honestly, it's hitting me across the landscape of college football, of just, I don't know if it's coaches just embracing the portal more. There's just like less complaining about roster turnover and having to adjust to it and whatnot. It's almost flipped of like it's a positive, and the LSU secondary is the perfect example of that. 15 years ago, 10 years ago, 7 years ago, if you had a bad secondary in 2024, the very next year it was like, well, shit, we better have some young guys step up or else our secondary is going to continue to be bad. LSU said, nah, that ain't the case. We're going to go in the portal and address it, flip it. Florida State, similar deal. Very much a theme of the weekend. Their free safety, Halsey, transferred in from Houston. Tamarcus Cooley transferred in from NC State. NC State loved him. He was a big-time player. They had Mansour Delane. Again, Virginia Tech loved Mansour Delane. In fact, I got my call sheet right in my drawer. Like, he was that dude for them at corner. And then DJ Pickett, man, he's going to be fun to watch. The 6'5 corner as a youngster, that's just stupid and should not exist. But that secondary for LSU, certainly not a weakness. And what it allows that defense to do is show up to the park week 1 on the road and bring exotic pressures because they trust that their secondary behind them is going to hold up. You couldn't do that last year, at least not with success. That was impressive. To show up to the park with those blitz packages against an NFL quarterback in Cade Klubnik, LSU is going to be good this year. LSU is going to be good this year. Third thing I learned, Florida State, man. Florida State's going to be a contender in the ACC, or at least a factor in the ACC. I've had this take all off season, and I felt like week 1, it showed up to be true. That second tier of the ACC is going to be fascinating. Between Florida State, Pitt, they played really well. Louisville played really well. North Carolina, we'll see what they bring to the park Monday night. I mean, you got Clemson, Miami in the tier 1. Georgia Tech, again, anyone who's followed Georgia Tech should not be surprised about what they did week 1. I actually walked away a little concerned about what I saw with Georgia Tech because I was hopeful that the offense would expand a little bit more than where it was last year. Just given that Haynes King has played a lot of football, that offense is in a phone booth, man. And if they play a team that's on par with them up front physicality-wise, and that offense is forced to throw the rock down the field, intermediate passing game, they're not built to do that. I'm not saying Haynes King can't do that. I'm not saying they don't have the playmakers to do that. But, again, like, to my point about LSU having multiple ways to beat you, my takeaway after week 1 is Georgia Tech's got one way to beat you. When the ground game's working, they're out physically you. Up front, Haynes King's working and healthy, and I feel like he's always banged up, though. But back to Florida State. The quarterback was a question mark, and I called the game when Thomas Castellanos got benched at Boston College, and I remember literally thinking, this is a really good college quarterback. He is just in the absolute wrong system. And those of you guys that have followed my content over the years, I've had to take, as my laptop's about to die, I'm going to plug that guy in. I've had to take over the years, over the past 3 years that, sorry, one sec. Offensive football or offensive schemes are dead in college football. And you might be like, Max, what you talking about? That's a bold take. It is a bold take. But every single time I'm in these meetings, every coach says the exact same thing. One sec, plug it in my computer. Every coach says the exact same thing. We want to be versatile. We want to be multiple. We want to combine the best passing concepts from the air raid with the best run concepts from the NFL versus the sexy, trendy motion of the time. And every offensive coordinator is just trying to, create like a jambalaya of what they feel like is the best mixture of that. The exception to that, there are a few exceptions to that. One of which is Gus Malzahn. Gus Malzahn has a very distinct offense where his quarterback has to be mobile. Your quarterback has to be a factor in the run game, keeps the defensive ends and the linebackers for the opposing team guessing. That's not that groundbreaking. There's other teams that do that. What is groundbreaking? Gus Malzahn's offenses don't have an intermediate passing game. Just cross that off. There is no intermediate passing game for the Florida State Seminoles. It's screens, it's RPOs, it's quick stuff to the sidelines, and then we call our play action shots. Maybe we do some comebacks on the outside. Maybe we throw a slant, quick game. There is no intermediate passing game for a Gus Malzahn offense. That is very unique. I can count the amount of offenses on one hand, definitely two hands, that have that identity. Literally a whole section of your call sheet is just not there. But I think Mike Norvell deserves a lot of credit. I mean, put yourself in that dude's shoes. You have to give money back to the program or like restructure your contract because your team was so bad. You were 2-10. if you go bad, if you're bad again, you're out of a job. You got to uproot your family, move across the country, lose out on a power four job, and he decides that he is going to put all his trust into Gus Malzahn, who's had up and down ever since like the Cam Newton days, up and down. Says no, Gus Malzahn's my guy. I'm going to commit to that offense, which Jordan Travis in this offense, he could have ran it because he's mobile. But Jordan Travis, he go play in a spread, normal pro style type of offense. This is a total pivot in terms of your, offensive identity. He trusts in Gus Malzahn and then doubles down and says, you know what? Let me go get a quarterback who just got benched by a school in my conference that me as my program, I view superior. I view myself as superior. Florida State compared to Boston College. It's no shade to Boston College, but if you're a Seminoles fan, that's how you view it. Yeah, let me go get that quarterback. And this is why. It was boomer bust for Tommy Castellanos. Tommy or Thomas? Whatever. Castellanos. But he's mini Kyler Murray. And when he's playing quick and Malzahn did a great job of not having him think at all, that dude is special. 9 for 14, 144 yards as a thrower. As a rusher, 15 carries, 85 yards, and a touchdown. Compared to Alabama, and that was one thing. Not only was Florida State moving the ball, they were scoring. Might be like, no shit, Max. No, they were scoring, which then when they got up, it put Alabama at a whack with their play calling. And they put the game in Ty Simpson's right arm, on his right arm. They got off the run game. If that game was close and that Alabama defense got some stops, even if Florida State moved the ball, I think Alabama would have stuck with the run game even more. And the whole complexion of how we view Alabama's offense and how we're viewing, the play callers, which I'm intrigued to see or dive in more with that. Of you got Ryan Grubb. I'm blanking on the dude who's still on staff that was the play caller last year, and Kalen DeBoer. It looked like there was 3 play callers in that game because they were all out of whack. But it was a big reason why, because Florida State got up early and was running the ball. So you get into the second quarter and you're like, yo, these possessions are going by quick. I got to do something, and I got to pass the rock to try to, quickly score. That's a tough spot to be in. But Florida State, man, they're going to be a factor in. My big takeaway with Florida State, with them being a factor, it not only is impactful for just the Florida State program and Mike Norvell, the state of Florida, the ACC, but the entire landscape of college football. Because when you look at Florida State's schedule, they got Florida at the back end and Clemson. My point is that they're going to impact the CFP if they're a factor, even if they don't make it. But if they're an 8-4 team, they're going to get Miami or Clemson or Pitt or NC State or Virginia if there is a dark horse ACC playoff type of team. Them being a real factor changes the optics of a lot of those team schedules. Zach, how we living? Drew, what's up, man? Archie boy, what up? Can't wait for Michigan versus Oklahoma next week. I got a big YouTube video coming out on John Mateer Thursday. Check it out. Dez, what's going on? The Big Ten runs college football, Doc says. Dude, this whole narrative, Big Ten versus SEC thing, I'm out on it. It's good content and good banter, but it's gonna flip. It's gonna flip over the years. It's gonna flip side to side. All right. Gus Malzahn, I want to dive deeper into him. Because, dude, we might look back after this year and Gus Malzahn might save Mike Norvell his job. And I already talked a little bit about what he did and how he's the perfect offensive coordinator for Castellanos. But before I go into that, I was watching the film, all 22 film. He had invented 3 concepts in that week 1 matchup that I had never seen before. And when I edit this for a YouTube short form, I'll try to overlay the clips of what I'm talking about. 3 things. And I didn't watch a ton of UCF film, so maybe someone's watching this like Max. He did that all the time last couple of years. But 3 things that were fascinating to me. He did this fake look back thing to the sideline. So football fans, you guys will know, a lot of people, they act like they're going to snap and then they look back to the sideline to get a play. Well, when they do that, defensive coordinators then look back to their sideline to change their defensive structure, so then the offense can't just pick the perfect play call versus that one defense. What Gus Malzahn does, and they must have some sort of alert or tag, they'll look to the sideline, but everyone knows they're going to snap it in a blink of an eye. So they're fake looking back, or they're literally looking back, but it's just an illusion. So there must be some sort of cadence of like, look back, set up, and the ball's snapped and they go. And what they're trying to do is catch the defense checking with their defensive coordinator and catching them in a bind. Because the dream scenario is they look back, they say set go, the defense is shifting their structure, and you can gash them, whether in the run or the pass. What it also does too is by being a team that does that with your cadence, looking back and fake checking with your coach, it doesn't allow the defense to change their defensive call. So then when you are actually looking back and getting a new play call, you can dice up against the exact defense that you're looking for. Genius by Gus Malzahn. I've never seen that before. I had Ole Miss last year in real life. That is genius. Every offensive coordinator that plays with tempo should be installing that this week. Tanner, clip that. That's a good short form. That's a good short form video. Second thing, I don't know if they did this on purpose, but if they didn't do it on purpose, they should install it in the playbook. They ran a tunnel screen for their quarterback. They ran a tunnel screen for Thomas Castellanos. Here's what I mean by that. You're like, Max, that's like physically impossible. How do you have a screen for your quarterback? Here's where it is. They're into the boundary. It's a left hash call for Florida State. Into the boundary. That matters because it's a shorter side of the field. They call a tunnel screen to that side of the field, meaning the receiver acts like he's going 3 steps up and then goes back underneath like he's going to go down the tunnel and on a screen route. When that happens, 3 offensive linemen release down to the numbers trying to pick up blockers, trying to get that corner, that linebacker, and that safety. Well, what happens is when you have a good athletic defensive line like Alabama, they recognize it's a tunnel screen. So that defensive end that's getting screened, when he realizes that, he then drops back into to go get the receiver, right? He's like, oh, running. They're trying to get a screen to the receiver. Let me go tackle the receiver. But then when all the defensive linemen run to go get the receiver, there's no one right in front of Thomas Castellanos, and he can just run down the center, especially with his athleticism. The reason that's a screen is because those linemen that just broke downfield to pick up the linebacker and the safety for the receiver, those guys are still getting blocked. So then Thomas Castellanos has lead blockers in front of him. You couldn't do that if you were trying to go to the field. It has to be to the boundary. It has to be to the short side of the field because the linemen wouldn't be able to get all the way out to their blocks. There's a world where I'm wrong with that take, and I guarantee there's an offensive coordinator being like, they may have just fell into a new concept. Because it could have been just a broken play. It could have been just, hey, that Alabama defensive end recognizing that and then just getting out there. That could have happened. But I don't think so. And install that quarterback tunnel screen if you haven't already. And then what they also did was a delayed screen. That's not the right term for it. I got to come up with a better term for it. But if you're hanging with me this far, you're going to love this. So they did, the center snaps it, but none of the offensive linemen move. And so it almost looks like they're trying to take a shot downfield and like catch the defense sleeping. Center snaps it, none of the defensive linemen move. What happens intuitively for the defensive line is they're like, oh shit, no one's moving on the offensive line. Let me go rush the passer. I have a clean rush. Let me go get Castellanos. That's what the offensive line wants you to do. So the offensive line is standing in their stance the whole time. Defensive line rushes past them because they're like, oh shit, the center made a mistake. He accidentally snapped it. But then once the defensive linemen run past the offensive lineman, O-linemen break downfield for a screen. So it's like the perfect setup to get rather than having to like pretend to block and then release to get the defensive lineman going upfield, you like deke out the defensive lineman, force them to rush the passer, thinking that the center accidentally snapped it, and then the offensive linemen get out of their stance and go downfield on a screen. Much easier to explain with a visual over the top of it. I'll try to hook that up, but I have never seen an offensive coordinator do all three of those things. Gus Malzahn, good on you. Clemson LSU, what do we got there? What do we got there? Some highlights for that Clemson LSU. LSU snapped a 5-game losing streak in season openers. That was the tied for the longest streak in school history. Nussmeier went 230 passing yards, 1 passing TD. It's funny, man. Stats lie. Stats lie, because Klubnik also had 230 passing yards. Yet you watch one quarterback, one dude looks like he might get drafted in the NFL tomorrow. The other dude looks like him and his offense have a long way of going to get to the point where they're playing at an elite level. Those of you guys that have followed my content, I've been a Nussmeier guy. Nussmeier, to me, if the NFL draft was tomorrow, Nussmeier would be the top quarterback taken. Klubnik has a tendency of some of these games coming up, or like when he plays these elite teams where it's just, it feels like every completion is hard. I'm calling the Clemson game next week. It's Clemson. I'm actually blanking on who they're playing. I got to check that out. But I'll be on the call for the Clemson game. So I'll be talking with Dabo on Friday, and I'll ask him about, what happened there. There was a couple plays where I think they missed some shots that could have changed the complexion of the game. But right now, Gus Nussmeier to me is the number one pro-style quarterback or the pro prospect quarterback, because he's just in full command. Full command. There's literally, you watch that game. I watched the All-22. Watching it right now, actually. There's not a single rep in that game. Like, I think he might grade out, like, almost perfectly. Like, obviously you have incompletions, but, like, literally grading out, the ball went where it needed to go, like, every time. Every time. Brian Kelly improved to 2-10 in his career versus AP top 5 opponents. Funny enough, his last win came against Clemson in 2020. That's his only other top 5 AP win. Cade Klubnik, his 3rd game without a pass TD since the start of last season. If you're an NFL prospect quarterback, that is not a good thing. Clemson drops to 0-4 versus the SEC since the start of last season. I know people love the conference debate these days. You know why I hate the conference debate? Because I spent 5 years battling that the Pac-12 was better than the Big 12, and I still think that to this day. For those years, the Pac-12 just didn't have the top tier program to carry the torch like the Big 12 did have with Oklahoma and like the ACC had with Clemson. But top to bottom, you say what conference is better? If you're saying conference, you have to include every team in that conference when you're making that argument. I made that argument with the Pac-12 for 5 years. Pac-12 folded, so I think I'm just like worn out of conference debate arguments because it's going to change every single year. I hope we do not have automatic qualifiers for a CFP. I think that would be terrible because there's going to be a world, and it might be this year, where the ACC deserves and earns 3 teams getting into the playoff. There's a realistic world where that happens, and there's a world where that 3rd team, that bonus team that the ACC gets in, assuming that the ACC usually will get 2 teams, could come at the expense of the SEC. And maybe the SEC only gets 3 teams in. And maybe the next year, it comes at the expense of the Big Ten. And the Big Ten only earns the right to get 3 teams in. I really hope we don't get automatic qualifiers. But that's another thing, a take I got is, if you're an ACC, if you're the ACC ADs and all that, part of me thinks you shouldn't want a 3rd team to get in, because imagine if a 3rd ACC team got in this year at the expense of an SEC school, and the SEC only got 3 teams in the big dance. That's going to light a fire under I'm blanking on his name, SEC commissioner. That's bad ball. That's going to light a fire under his ass to be like, no, we need automatic qualifiers ASAP. And so if you're Clemson, you almost want them to lock in a long-term or if you're the ACC. You almost want them to lock in a long-term playoff format for the next decade and then get your third team in. So then the Big Ten and the SEC can't change the rules. But, yeah. LSU will be interesting, though, because, man, it feels like this year could be the year where a 9-win team gets into the playoff. That would mean that you get 3 losses and you still get in the big dance. Like, when it's all said and done, how big of a deal is this win? You know, how big of a deal is it? It's a big deal in the sense of potentially, getting a bye the first round. That's a big deal. But look at their schedule, man. Coming up, LSU's got number 15 Florida in 2 weeks, September 13th. Number 10 Miami, the week after that. Then a bye, then versus Texas, then 19th overall Texas A&M. Like, just an absolute gauntlet. The SEC is going to be a bloodbath. I don't think anyone goes through that schedule undefeated. My point, though, is when it's all said and done, how big is this one game? Could be big if Clemson finds themselves right on the fringe. But in the new era of college football, it's big from a fan perspective. But if we're being honest, and obviously you got to win them, right? Like, if the 10-2 team versus the 9-3 team, that could be the difference between getting a bye. So I'm not saying it doesn't matter. But it doesn't matter to the level that it would have 7 years ago. That's a fact. That's a fact. Talking UNC next. How we living? I can't see the TikTok chat, so appreciate anyone who's hanging over there. YouTube, Dom, what's going on? What I think about the Minkah trade and his new contract. I respect Herbie's take on that. Jerry Jones is never going to say that. Never going to say that they're, tanking or not playing, not vying for a Super Bowl because Jerry Jones has run out of time and the whole deal. But this move, if Schottenheimer is your head coach, which we can debate whether or not he was the right decision, but if he's your head coach, you got to cut bait with any sort of off-field drama. Not saying Micah Parsons himself is drama, but cut bait, get those picks, potentially build towards the future. I think there's some credibility in that. Because if you sign Micah Parsons, like, it just feels like the clocks weren't aligned. You sign Micah Parsons, well, then what do you do with Dak here in a couple years? Do you really have enough resources to actually win a Super Bowl if you sign Micah Parsons? I don't know. I don't think so. They better freaking hit with those draft picks, but people were all over Jerry Jones on that, and Jerry needs to put down the damn mic. But I don't think it's as crazy. If another GM made that move, I don't think it'd be as crazy. I think it's crazy because of the history of what Jerry Jones has been and what the Cowboys have been over the past 30 years, 25 years. That to me is why I think people are like very much up in arms about it. The stakes of tomorrow night's game for Bill Belichick. Fascinated to see how that plays out. My first ESPN hit. Appreciate anyone and all the well wishes over there on YouTube and TikTok about the new gig. Called my first game for ESPN yesterday. But it'll be fascinating. I'll be hanging out in the ACC country. I'm calling UNC's game week 3. So I'll be chatting with Bill Belichick here in 13 days. But tomorrow's game sets the tone for this entire season. And there's a lot of uncertainty, which is unique because usually when you hire a high-profile head coach, you kind of know what they're bringing to the park. When USC hires Lincoln Riley, you kind of know what he's bringing to the park. Brian Kelly, LSU, you know, hey, he might say some weird one-liners, but his teams are going to be competitive. With Bill Belichick, I have no idea if his team's going to be this gritty Pats level, those types of teams. If they're going to be receptive to his message, is Bill going to be much more animated on the sideline? Is it going to be stoic? It's not the NFL. He's going to have to rally guys up. I'm very intrigued to see how that works. But UNC did something that I haven't heard anyone else talk about, and I've never seen it in my football career, in that they retained a coach and then promoted that dude to their play caller. Freddie Kitchens, who's well-known in the football world, he was Baker's OC, most notably for the Cleveland Browns. He was on staff with Mac Brown last year. as tight end coach, run game coordinator, I think. Bill Belichick retains him and then promotes him to play calling duties. That is unheard of. That's unheard of for a few different reasons. One, usually that guy, if you were that qualified to be the play caller, why weren't you just play caller with the first staff? It's also unique because a lot of head coaches, they want to start fresh with the program. Sometimes when you carry over coaches, even if that coach is great, his message might fall on deaf ears because it's like, yeah, that guy was here with the last staff. So the fact that Bill Belichick did that, no one's talking about that. I've never seen that before. You retain a coach and then promote him to your play caller. But I'm fascinated to see what that looks like for UNC, Bill Belichick, Freddie Kitchens in year one. I also don't know what this offense is going to look like. Gio Lopez, their starting quarterback, he's a dude that rushed for about 500 yards last year. I believe he was 18 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. That's a good mark. That dude can protect the football. That dude can run. But are they going to have it be a quarterback run type of offense? Or is it going to be, no, have him operate from the pocket and his legs will just be an added bonus? I don't know. What I do know is North Carolina must not have liked their quarterback position in general coming out of spring ball or where it stood because Gio Lopez got there in spring. Most guys, this is what I did when I transferred from USC to Pitt, you try to get in there before spring ball so you can get acclimated the whole time. UNC went through a whole spring ball installing their scheme with the dude that's not even gonna be their signal caller. That's significant. If it is a running quarterback first type of offense, what intrigues me is you have Kitchens was with Baker Mayfield, who's from a college. He's got dual threat capabilities, at least from like a college quarterback type of level, maybe not NFL level. But so you have the Baker Mayfield with Kitchens. Cam Newton was with Bill Belichick at the end of his career. Again, I know it wasn't Cam Newton, Auburn Cam Newton. But those are two different styles of what it looks like to have a mobile quarterback. Where on that spectrum does Gio Lopez fall? That'll be interesting to me. And I got asked the question earlier this week of, what is year one? What's the legacy? Or no, the question was, can UNC back up the hype? Or is the hype too much? And to me, there's hype, there's storylines, but nobody is expecting UNC to contend for an ACC title. So in some way, there's like not hype. So I do think North Carolina can back it up because it's almost just like talking points. No one's like actually saying, hey, they can go win an ACC title. The comparison that comes to my mind is what's the last school to be picked to finish 8th in their conference that we've talked about this much. It was Bill Belichick this year. It was Deion Sanders a few years ago. The big difference is Deion and Shedeur were telling everyone that they're coming in to win and win championships right away. And we're like, yo, this Colorado team, they were booty the year before. Maybe slow your roll. I respect it. They were trying to change the culture. That's not been Bill Belichick's temperament at all. I'm not saying he's saying they're going to like lose, but I don't think year one there's this immense amount of pressure on Bill Belichick. To me, I look to that 8-win mark. That's a mark that Mack Brown reached 3 different times. Big difference. Mack Brown had 2 NFL starting quarterbacks, so that's why UNC fans were like, yeah, he might have been like underperforming there. Bill Belichick, he doesn't have that. And I think he's got some leash this first year. But I do think it'll come to a head in year 2 if they haven't taken a step this year. Next year is where they really got to make it happen. But I think big picture, it's that 8-win mark. Vegas has them at like 6.5, 7.5. That 8-win mark. But big picture, you got to be walking away from this season if you're Bill Belichick and UNC, feeling like the program's on an upward trajectory, not on a middling trajectory. Which that's the trap that Mack Brown fell into. It was like, all right, North Carolina's not bad, but we're not getting better. We're certainly not in that first tier of Clemson and Miami, and I would still put Florida State in that first tier of how the ACC is perceived in totality. The past like 5 years. Obviously, last year was tough for FSU, but there is no reason North Carolina can't own the top of that second tier. It should be. There's no reason with the resources, with the access. There's no reason it can't be really. There's no reason it can't be Clemson, Miami, Florida State, and then North Carolina right there on their own. Virginia Tech fans might have something to say about that. Georgia Tech fans might have something to say about that. But man, there's no reason it can't be that way, and it's not going to be easy because talk about Pitt, talk about NC State, talk about SMU, talk about the excitement with Syracuse. I saw Virginia in person yesterday. That's a way better Virginia team than last year. There's a lot of teams that view, Max, get out of here with that take. We belong in the second tier. But North Carolina, after this year one with Bill Belichick, they got to be upward trajectory. Big game tomorrow. Versus TCU. That quarterback, Josh Hoover, TCU was a weird team last year. I had them in person week 3, the Iron Skillet, and Josh Hoover can play football. Josh Hoover is the dude that beat out Chandler Morris, who's now supposed to be Virginia's savior and played really well yesterday and played really well at North Texas last year. TCU had 2 NFL receivers out there, yet they couldn't really win. They're not that far removed from their CFP run as well. If they don't win and they don't get off to a hot start, Sonny Dykes his seat's going to be heating up. So something's got to give. It's got to start fast for Bill Belichick, and it's also right the ship for Sonny Dykes. And that game, UNC's got the 6th easiest schedule in college football. TCU is one of their harder games. If they beat TCU, they got, I believe it's 3 cupcakes after that. Circle it on your calendars. First weekend of October. Potentially could be an undefeated Bill Belichick squad. I don't know if it's at Death Valley, but they're playing Clemson. That could be a good one. Circle it on your calendar. I believe it's October 6th. And that's all I got. Almost up against time. 8 minutes left. What questions we got here? Favorite places to eat in Clemson? I went there one time. John, I went there one time last year, and I went to Chipotle. And then they gave us, and then I went straight to the airport. So that's all I got for you. What did I have for dinner that night? I don't know. If you got Rex, let me know. Ryan is hungry, says, Max, should we get rid of Deshaun Foster already? A UCLA take. I got 2 comments here. Unfortunately, I'm not surprised. In the NIL era, UCLA, man, that was going to be tough sled. And I've been saying that since the second that they went over to the Big Ten. That is a tough go for them. And one of those things that they might look back in 10 years from now, and it got the school out of some financial troubles, but the football program, only so many wins to go around. The luxury that UCLA had in the Pac-12 and Pac-10 days is any recruit that USC couldn't get, I'll just go over here. USC's only got so many scholarships. Okay, UCLA just naturally had a great roster. It's not how it works in NIL because you have to pay up, and UCLA can't do that. I will say this, though. I've always liked Nico Iamaleava's game. I've always thought that he got a little bit of a raw deal at Tennessee because the expectations were so high to start that any game he didn't look like a first-round quarterback, it was like, what's going on? He's got an opportunity if he can stay healthy because I didn't watch all that game. It was 2 a.m. where I was at this morning over on the East Coast. But that offensive line, if that's a struggle, he's got to stay healthy. But it's an opportunity for him. If he can carry that team to a bowl game, Nico Iamaleava, there's no reason he can't be right in the top tier of the NFL draft quarterback conversation. If he says, hey, we're not going to win a Big Ten title, we're not going to win the CFP, or we're not going to make it to the CFP, but I got an opportunity to show that I'm that dude, and I can put a team on my back, which I think he has the capability to do, and get out of the Heupel system, which, dude, Tennessee looked really good, and Josh Heupel's a great coach, but that system is very specific, and it's not NFL-oriented. My point is, Nico's got an opportunity to prove something this season, and even by being on a worse team, show that he's an NFL quarterback. Zach, I didn't. My bad, dude. You said that. What did I do? Again, I'm so basic. I went to Starbucks, but I'm a Seattle native, man. Zach was hooking me up with a Charlottesville coffee shop. I think it was like, you know when you're staying at a hotel and you could get in the car and drive 4 minutes to a place a mile away, or just walk outside and go to the local coffee shop, which was a Starbucks. That's where I was at. But I got my venti Starbucks. I like Virginia's got a cool like memorial little lawn area. Charlottesville and Virginia, the grounds. Sorry, I said campus. It's the grounds at Virginia. That campus is sick. Virginia. I'm a West Coast guy. No one really talks about Virginia. That campus is sick, but no, I didn't go to your coffee shop. My bad, Zach. Should us UCLA fans give up on football? No, because you guys should be able to recruit if you had some money. Wasserman and the boys can cough up some dough and get you guys back in the fold. Two schools, man, UCLA and Pitt. I'm a Pitt Panther. Got to build the on-campus stadium some way. And I just drove past UCLA last week, and we're still building that frickin' transit rail for the Olympics that's been going on for a decade. That's what, like millions, maybe $1 billion over budget? No, millions of dollars over budget. But like that's where you would put a on-campus stadium. Hopefully I call an NC State game. Yeah, Zach. Probably will, to be honest. I had 4 last year. I had 4. What else we got? I got 3 more minutes. TikTok. I'm not on the chat, so I can't see your questions over there. Miami, Notre Dame. Any thoughts on how Longstreet looked? JP, he's talking Hassan Longstreet, played the second half for USC. I have not had a chance to watch the USC game. I haven't seen any clips. I listened to Lincoln Riley's post-game presser for 10 minutes while I was unpacking my luggage this morning, and me reading between the lines, it didn't sound like Longstreet was like overly impressive because Lincoln was given a softball question to like totally hype up his young quarterback, and you could tell he likes him. Sounds like he had some good runs and good mobility, but my take, having been in that room and in those questions, my sense is, and I said this offseason, my sense is Longstreet's got a full step to go pass game wise and progressions and whatnot getting there. But I could be totally wrong there. I need to watch the All-22 and get back to you. But Jaden Maeva, man. Jaden Maeva could be that dude. Sounds like he played really well. It's funny, I got a USC group chat, and any USC fans that are listening to this, I feel like every USC fan has this, where you got a group chat with your homies, with your boys, and first quarter, I get a text, our team sucks, what is this? I feel like I've gotten that every single year for the past, 10 years, ever since I stopped playing football, or since I left USC. And then you start warming up second, third, fourth quarter, and you're like, all right, this team's pretty solid. Georgia Southern, though, next week, the Fighting Clay Heltons coming to town, coming to the Collie. Dude, that's the next game, right? The USC football schedule. Georgia Southern, the Fighting Clay Heltons coming to the Collie next week. Put a mic and camera in the visiting locker room in the Coliseum because Clay Helton is going to be fucking juiced up. He's coming back to play the team that fired him. And this is the last note I'll end on because this is a good full circle moment. This is good content right here. When Clay Helton writes his book, I think if Clay Helton didn't take over for Steve Sarkisian, his tenure at USC could have been a lot different because Clay Helton got molded the nice guy within our locker room because there was so much troubles with Sark that then when Helton became the guy, it was like, all right, finally, now we got some, consistency, and Helton had a relationship with everyone. But then that worked against him 3 years later, in my opinion, because then when he needed to be a hard ass and get on guys and have the team be gritty and physical, he wasn't able to do that because then it's like, dude, what? You're supposed to be like the nice guy. You're supposed to be like the warm coach that I can go to and have that conversation. Like, what is that? Why that relates today and why I said it's a full circle moment is I think there's some of that going on with Kalen DeBoer at Alabama. Different optics, but a similar dynamic in the sense that he takes the Alabama job. Nick Saban is a hard-ass coach. He established a foundation of I'm going to love you, but I'm going to chew you out, and I'm going to get on you, and I'm going to ride you hard. New guy comes in. Kalen DeBoer is having to prevent incredible roster turnover. I don't know this to be a fact, but I'd imagine that he is not ripping into guys. He's not being a hard ass. Maybe and he prides himself on the loving culture, which I think is real. But you can have tough love too. But I would be willing to bet that transition, which is the whole reason that it's so hard to take over for the man, because when you try to establish your way and you try to rip on guys and get on guys and enforce your culture, then guys at Alabama are like, what? Get out of here. Like, I'll transfer, I'll go elsewhere. And then, once you're now the nice guy and the guy's like, oh, that's kind of nice, man. I'm starting safety at Alabama. I'm starting edge rusher at Alabama. Like, this is good. Like, Kalen DeBoer, he's a nice guy. He's a good guy. I like him. Well, now DeBoer's got to choose some people out because Alabama's defense was lethargic. Florida State owned the edges. But then when DeBoer now choose guys out, it's like, where'd this guy come from? You can't do this. I think there's some of that going on. I would be willing to bet some of that's going on. It happened to USC with Clay Helton. I think if the order or when Clay Helton got that job was different, he's a good head coach. He's a good coach. I think he could have had a lot more success. But that's the first in-season Max Brown show until I come up with a better name. If you guys got ideas, let me know. I'm going every Sunday at 4:30 Pacific Standard Time. It is the only untapped football window in college football. I guess all of Sunday. But 4:30, it's that awkward time before the second slate of NFL games comes on. It's after that, after second slate, before Sunday Night Football comes on. Sorry, all over the place with those words. There's like a 45-minute chunk. We're all kind of on our couch like, dude, I need something to consume. That's why I'm doing 4:30. Watch your NFL games and be like, all right, what's Brownie got college football wise? But I'll be back next week. Next game, I got Clemson. I think they're playing Troy. I could be wrong with that. Sounds like I got to do some prep. I watched their all-22 game today. But thanks everyone hanging. Appreciate you guys.